Welcome, everyone, to a special edition of the Days of Roar podcast, a Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Evan Petzold, and I'm joined by a special guest for a special episode to recap the winter meetings in Orlando, Florida. Our guest is Bob Nightengale, USA TODAY Sports Major League Baseball columnist and insider for all things happening on the free agent and trade markets. Bob, thank you for joining the show. We're both back home from the winter meetings. How are you doing after 3 days in Orlando?
Yeah, got a little rest last night and all set. Those are always long days and long nights.
If you had to grade these winter meetings from an A to an F, how would you grade them based on activity level? Not just moves, but general buzz as well.
Buzz-wise, it might have been a B-, buzz-wise. Activity, maybe a D+, C-. The only reason I say that, everybody in the world knew that Kyle Schwarber was going back to Philadelphia. No surprise. And, everybody pretty much knew it. Alonso was not going back to the Mets. Nobody knew where he's going to go. But I think they kind of set enough signals, particularly when Edwin Díaz bolted the day before. So probably, the biggest surprise of the meetings was that Edwin Díaz ended up with the Dodgers at a pretty good discount price.
So we'll get into those moves, and we have a lot to discuss, including Tarik Skubal. But before we do that, I want to start with the Detroit Tigers in the 2025 season. They were 3 games ahead of the Dodgers for the best record in baseball at 59-34 on July 9th. They sent 6 players to the All-Star game, including Javi Baez. And then they went 28-41, their final 69 games. To end the regular season, they blew a 15.5-game lead to the Cleveland Guardians to lose the American League Central. We saw them at the trade deadline go for quantity over quality. And it landed them Kyle Finnegan, who was great, but it also landed them Charlie Morton, Chris Paddock, Rafael Montero, and Paul Sewald. You just wonder what the Tigers would have been had they acquired Kyle Finnegan and David Bednar for their bullpen, and maybe Eugenio Suarez for their offense. But regardless, what did you think about the Tigers in the 2025 season, from the red hot start to the 6 All-Stars to the disappointing trade deadline to the late season collapse, and once again, another elimination in the postseason in Game 5 of the ALDS?
Yeah, the way they were rolling there, I think I made my hotel reservations for the World Series in the late playoffs in June. So yeah, big collapse. But the fact they beat Cleveland in the first round, then it kind of made up for it. Like, okay, no harm, no foul sort of thing. But it does kind of open your eyes like, wait a minute now, who are the real Tigers? So that's why I think instead of just running back to the same guys, they do have to make some moves. I remember when Atlanta won the 14 straight division titles, they made moves every single year, because you got to keep things fresh in there.
Well, let's start right there. Let's set the groundwork for the Tigers here in the offseason. They've signed starter Drew Anderson for 1 year, $7 million. He's making his MLB return after 4 seasons in Asia, including the last 2 seasons in the KBO League. They've also signed reliever Kyle Finnegan for 2 years, $19 million. We're all familiar with him. From the outside looking in, do the Tigers need to do anything else this offseason to ensure that not only they get back to the postseason, but they have a real chance at winning the World Series in what seems like it's going to be Tarik Skubal's final year as a Tiger?
Yeah, they got to get some more pitching. And like you said, with Tarik Skubal's last year as a Tiger, you got to, pounce now on grabbing someone that's going to replace him. The Padres did that a year ago when they made the Mason Miller deal, knowing that, hey, Robert Suarez is not coming back. Now we'll have Miller. Same thing here. Grab a starter now, knowing that, okay, when Skubal leaves as a free agent, he gets, not saying he's got, the new guy's got the ace, but number 1, 2, or 3 type starter. I would go get another reliever for sure, back end reliever. What is Pete Fairbanks or someone else? There's not a whole lot out there. And certainly get another starter right now.
Want to ask too, I know we mentioned Drew Anderson and Kyle Finnegan, both of those guys signing in free agency, but also Gleyber Torres accepting the 1 year, $22.025 million qualifying offer, and Jack Flaherty accepting his $20 million player option. Did those decisions surprise you? And do you think those players are worth what they're making in 2026? Is Gleyber Torres worth $22 million? Is Jack Flaherty worth $20 million? What are your thoughts?
I think Flaherty is for a 1 year deal. You always hear the thing, but there's not no such thing as a bad 1 year deal. So, for $20 million for him, probably right. Torres, I think when he got the qualifying offer, everybody said, you know what, he's going to take it. In both those cases, when these guys get those qualifying offers, their agents sniff around and start calling teams. Are you interested in my client as a free agent? And obviously the answer was no, not at that price. So those guys don't take the Florida does not take the qualifying offer or exercise his option without his agent knowing that you're not going to do any better in the market. Same way with Gleiber. It's like, hey, take this thing right now. We'll hit free agency again. So those are actually educated decisions. They knew that there wasn't a bigger market out there.
All right, we need to talk about Tigers left-hander Tarik Skubal, and there is a lot to discuss here. But here's how I view it based on everything I've gathered. I don't think the Tigers will extend him. I don't think the Tigers will trade him. And if they keep him, I don't think the Tigers will suddenly go all in to win with him. He becomes a free agent after the 2026 season. He projects to become the first $400 million pitcher in MLB history. His agent is Scott Boras. He's a back-to-back Cy Young winner. Over the past 2 seasons, the Tigers are 42-20 in Skubal starts. They're 131 in non-Skubal starts. So they're 22 games above 500 with him and exactly 500 without him. He is the best pitcher in baseball. What do you think is going to happen with the Tigers and Tarik Skubal with about 10 months left until he reaches free agency? Extend, trade, or keep?
I think definitely keep. Obviously, he wants to stay there. His agent, Scott Boras, is making clear like it's silly to trade him. I don't think any team, overwhelms the Tigers with an offer that, that's going to have them compelled to trade him. You're getting a guy for 32 starts. He's going to be a free agent in a year. What team is going to just give up all their top pitchers? So I don't see it. Now they can reevaluate at the trade deadline. Say, okay, where the Tigers sitting? If the Tigers are having a down year, there's no brainer to go ahead and trade him. But, it's not like a Juan Soto thing where Soto had 2.5 years left. You got 1 year left. He's not even, not an everyday position player, obviously. So I think they keep him. That's what I think they should add on to him and try to make this a special year. And then, when he walks, so be it. But I think you got to go for it one more time.
And if he does walk, then you get the draft pick compensation when he signs elsewhere. So at least you're getting a little something. But I do want to ask, if the Tigers were to keep him, what do you think it would take for the Tigers to sign him to a contract extension? I don't think it's likely. I mean, there's pretty much a 0% chance that Tarik Skubal is signing a contract extension. But if it were to happen, what would it take for the Tigers to lock him down? Do you think $450 million right now gets it done? Or do you think Scott Boras is taking Tarik Skubal to free agency no matter what?
As long as he likes Detroit, and from all indications he does, I think 450, would get it done, or, high 400s. The record is Garrett Cole, 9 years at 360. He's going to top this. So I think if the Tigers came in right now and said, hey, 10 years at 450, it would get it done. But, they're not going to do that. And he wants to test the free agent market. But, it's hard to imagine he would get more than $450 million. But we didn't think Soto was going to get over over $500 million, let alone over $750.
So if the Tigers decide we can't extend him and they get to a point this offseason where they decide we're going to just trade him now, what teams are most likely to acquire him this offseason?
Yeah, I don't see a team, just jumping out there. I mean, the one team that jumps out, of course, is the Dodgers. They have all the capital in the world. They know they can sign him as a free agent or extend him right now if they really wanted to. They could do it. But, you hear Emmett Sheehan and stuff. It's like, come on, he's like the 4th or 5th starter right now. There's really no package that's going to make up for Tarik Skubal. There's no ace out there. The Pirates want to trade Paul Skeens. Okay, you'll have something there. But I don't see any team just, giving up what it would take to get him. And if you're the Tigers, these guys are prospects and stuff and young guys. They're not Tarik Skubal. So they're not going to get fair return.
Yeah, walk me through that, especially from a value standpoint when you think about the Tigers and one of the other 29 teams trying to align on value here. I've heard a lot of people reference, hey, the Tigers can get more in a Tarik Skubal trade if Skubal agrees to a contract extension with the team that's acquiring him before the trade. But I just can't see how that happens because doesn't Scott Boras want a bidding war in free agency no matter what? I just think it's going to be hard for the Tigers to align on value in a Skubal trade because the Tigers view Skubal as the best pitcher in baseball. The other 29 teams view him as a one-year rental. And there's no guarantee he's going to take a contract extension because Scott Boras wants a bidding war. Isn't that the hard part about trying to align on a Tarik Skubal trade? And is it a gap that you think the Tigers and a different team could close? Or do you think it's pretty much impossible to align on value with this type of a player so close to free agency?
I think it's impossible for every team except for the Dodgers, because the Dodgers could turn around right now and say, okay, what does it take to lock him out right now? $500 million? Well, okay, we'll do that. But the Tigers aren't going to give any team permission to talk to him. Teams used to do that, give a 72-hour window, but it kind of backfires because once the teams start talking to, Boras and Skubal, they realize, oh man, we can't bridge the gap. Word spreads. So I don't think there's any way in the world the Tigers would give any team the right to talk to him first. So I don't think you can get an equal value for him. You really can't. And every team says, are we really going to give up a package that's going to hurt in the future, really hurt for 34 starts? They're not.
So let's forecast ahead. Let's say Tarik Skubal stays with the Tigers and simply becomes a free agent after the 2026 season, which I think is the most likely outcome. And it sounds like you think that is the most likely outcome as well. What team will sign him, and for how much will they sign him for in the 2026-27 offseason?
Well, I think you're looking at a 10-year deal. Like talked about 9 years, $360 for Garrett Cole. He wants to break that record. So I see about a 10-year deal for a minimum of $450 million. And we'll see who's going to be around then. I mean, you're going to have the Mets, the Dodgers. That's about it. When those guys get a high price, I think people think, oh, you're going to have 29 teams bidding yet. You don't. You have 2 or 3 teams maximum who are going to take on that type of contract. So I think that's what it'll take. 10 years at $450 to $500.
Aside from Tarik Skubal, we need to talk about free agent third baseman Alex Bregman. He opted out of his 3-year, $120 million contract with the Boston Red Sox after one season, leaving $80 million on the table to become a free agent. The Tigers and the Cubs were the other 2 finalists last offseason. I could see Bregman trying to secure 6 years, $172 million this offseason. I'm not sure if he's going to get that unless a team like the Mets or the Yankees or the Blue Jays really gets involved for his services. We know the Red Sox want to keep him, and maybe there's more pressure on the Red Sox now than ever before with them missing out on Kyle Schwarber and Pete Alonso in free agency. As for the Tigers, I reported heading into the winter meetings that the Tigers' interest in Bregman was lukewarm, meaning they like the player, they're keeping tabs on his market, but as of the start of the winter meetings, they weren't aggressively pursuing him. I think we could see the Tigers try to wait out his market, see how things unfold. Maybe if he's still out there in mid-January, they jump into the mix. But as of now, I'm not sure Alex Bregman will be playing for the Tigers in 2026. What do you think about Bregman, the Red Sox, the Tigers, and any other teams in the mix, and how his market is going to unfold this offseason after it collapsed last offseason?
Yeah, the Red Sox were surprised. I think they thought he was going to stay with that contract. I mean, he's not going to get $40 million a year from any other team. Yeah, will he get more than 80? Sure. I think that Red Sox would like to have him back. They don't feel like they have to have him. I mean, miss some time and stuff. And the Tigers, won all those games without him, made the playoffs, beat Cleveland the first round, without him. The Cubs, Matt Shaw has been fine at third base, particularly for a rookie. I don't think the Cubs are in at all. Blue Jays were never in on him last year. They have no interest in Bregman. So, I think he's going to run out of teams. Besides the Red Sox, who's really in on Bregman? Could the Dodgers do that a year from now? Yeah, a year from now. They got Max Muncy. So, yeah, I don't see a big bidding war at all. I think teams are going to wait him out.
Do you think Alex Bregman would do another 3-year deal with opt-outs? Or at this point in his career, entering his age 32 season, is he going to take whatever he can get for 5 years or 6 years? And how could that impact the Tigers' pursuit, knowing the Tigers offered 6 years last offseason? While the Red Sox were at 3 years and the Cubs were at 4 years, maybe that's an opportunity for the Tigers to strike if we get into mid-January, late January, and Alex Bregman still doesn't have a home for 2026.
Yeah, I think if the Tigers offer the same deal they did last year, he's going to take it. I don't think anyone's going to top that. I really don't. Like I said, Red Sox liked him a lot, but he wasn't, a difference maker. Remember now, when he was in with the Houston Astros, very good player, but there were a few players that were better than him. Whether it's Altuve or Correa, that sort of thing. He had a nice season in Boston, but not a fabulous season. The Mets aren't going to jump in. They've already shown the direction they're typically going. So if I'm the Tigers, I just kind of sit back and wait for them to him to fall in their lap. I think it ends up with either Detroit or Boston. I just have a hard time seeing an inner team involved.
It sounds like the Red Sox are interested in trading for Diamondback second baseman Ketel Marte. What are you hearing there, and how could that impact the Bregman market?
Yeah, that might put some pressure on Bregman. I mean, you get Marte, then all of a sudden they don't have to have Bregman. So I think it'd be a big thing. And right now you got Cincinnati, Tampa in on him as well as Boston. But no, I would think if they don't get Marte, they may turn and say, you know what, we'll grab Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette is going to certainly affect the Bregman market too, just because of money involved.
Bob, let's dig into some of the national news that happened at the winter meetings. Designated hitter Kyle Schwarber returns to the Phillies for 5 years, $150 million. I know the Mets, Pirates, Red Sox, Reds, Orioles, Giants, they were all connected to him. But was there ever a doubt Kyle Schwarber would stick with the Phillies? How did you see this go down? And what do you think about the reunion?
Yeah, there was zero chance he was leaving. I mean, whether it was John Middleton, the owner, Dave Dombrowski, everybody in the world says we have to have him back. Not just what he does on the field, but what he does in the clubhouse. I mean, he's the guy in there. Cincinnati, they were probably the closest. They would have gone as high as he wanted. And I think eventually Schwarber said, you know what, don't waste your time. I'm going back to Philadelphia. He also didn't want to be the guy that just kind of carries a franchise like in Cincinnati. Now, with the Reds, he would have sold a lot of tickets. He would have probably made them more money than anywhere else. Would have been a huge spike. But, I think Baltimore was intriguing only if Philadelphia didn't match. But Philadelphia did what pretty much the Yankees used to always do. Let a guy hit free agency, test the market, and then come back and we'll match it. And that's what they did.
Were you surprised that the Pirates and the Reds entered the bidding for Kyle Schwarber? And could we expect either of those teams, the Pirates or the Reds, to get aggressive in free agency throughout the rest of the offseason? Or do you think this was more about the fit of Kyle Schwarber and less about a redefined approach for those two teams?
I think the Reds was sincere. I think, remember, they had the big thing in August where he threw out the first pitch. His dad was there as a youth coach, catching ceremonial first pitches, being the local guy. I think in their mind, they thought, you know what, our attendance is probably going to spike by 30%. Advertising, promotions, he could be a must-see attraction. I think Pittsburgh would love to have him. I think it's more of a PR stunt. I mean, Pittsburgh couldn't wait to tell everybody, hey, look what we offered for Schwarber. I don't think that was real. And when you're a team that's going bad, you got to outbid everybody. I mean, for Pittsburgh to even have a chance at Schwarber, they would have probably had to offer $200 million for Philadelphia to say, okay, wait a minute, maybe we'll step back. So I think Pittsburgh will spend some money. I think the Reds, it was Schwarber or nothing. I don't see them using that same money and grabbing players just because the marketability. Pittsburgh, they're not going to spend that kind of money. But I think they'll spend some. They have to. The Player Association is going to be filing a grievance on these guys saying, hey, you quit pocketing all the money you're getting from revenue sharing.
Closer Edwin Díaz signed for 3 years, $69 million with the Dodgers. I was surprised for several reasons. One, I thought Díaz would end up returning to the Mets. Two, I thought Díaz would get a 5-year deal or at least a 4-year deal. But it's 3 years, $69 million for $33 million in average annual value. Were you and the rest of the industry as shocked as I was that Edwin Díaz signed for 3 years with the Dodgers?
Well, like you said, he kept asking him for 5, and I think he might have got some 4-year offers, but he wasn't getting 5 from anybody. And I think Díaz was stunned when they signed Devin Williams, 3 years, $51 million. And all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, no. Are the Mets really going to spend $150 million on two back-end relievers? That wasn't happening. I thought when they signed Williams, I thought, you know what? I bet they could walk away here. Now, I was surprised it was the Dodgers. A lot of guys don't want to go all the way back west. But I think Díaz would say, you know what? The way I'm trending here, I got a chance for the Hall of Fame one day. And what better way to go to the Hall of Fame than say 50, 60 games for the Dodgers? Kudos to the Dodgers for being able to get him for that. That's in a cheap price, but the 3-year price fit right into them. So, and I think, even though the Mets had offered, 3 years at 66, I think Díaz was so offended by the way the Mets were approaching this. They said, you know what? I'm not even going to bother letting them match it. I'll mark it.
First baseman Pete Alonso signed with the Baltimore Orioles for 5 years, $155 million. The Orioles need pitching. There's no denying that, but the firepower in this lineup is legit. What do you think about Alonso to the Orioles, and what do you think is next for the Orioles and what we know is a very competitive AL East?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right, Evan. Now they got to get pitching, or else you just wasted Alonso. Alonso's a nice ad. It made perfect sense. Once Schwarber, and we're getting Schwarber, it's like, okay, we'll get the same money and add $1 million a year for Alonso. Perfect fit there. But yeah, they got to get some pitching. They got to get one of the big boys, whether it's, Framber Valdez, Imai, drop off if you want to get a Michael King, that sort of thing. But they got to get at least one big time guy, if not two starters, to have a chance at division. I mean, it's a bear there, particularly with what Toronto's done.
How do the Mets respond to all of this? Losing both Edwin Díaz and Pete Alonso to other teams in free agency, those were two of the most beloved players with the Mets, and now they're on different teams. Do you think the Mets respond with a owner Steve Cohen-like splash? Or is the fact that the Mets didn't throw their money at Díaz and Alonso a signal of a different way of doing things under President of Baseball Operations David Stearns? What's going on with the Mets, and what's going to happen here?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a story the other day about that, saying, hey, you can take David Stearns on Milwaukee, but you can't take Milwaukee to David Stearns. He wants to do it his way. He wants to, get the, with young guys, energetic guys, defense. Obviously, what they did, I think there was a clubhouse problem there. Don't forget Brandon Nimmo, very popular there. And for Nimmo to waive his no-trade clause, you say, wait a minute now. He has a home in Port St. Lucie where the Mets train. So he might have thought things aren't going well there either. So I think they keep going like this and just kind of getting younger, cheaper guys, kind of value the metrics more than just a PR thing. I give credit for Stearns, but not caring that he's a public enemy number one in New York and everybody's ripping him and Steve Cohen. I also think that Steve Cohen hired Stearns. They gave him, $12, $14 million a year. Anybody could sit back and write paychecks. I think they wanted him for his ingenuity and letting him do it his way. I also think that last year when they got Soto, that was a Steve Cohen signing. It's almost like Cohen says, okay, I got my guy. Now I'm going to turn the car keys over to you, David, and you get the team the way you want.
Those were the three notable moves at this year's winter meetings. There are still a lot of free agents out there. Let's start with outfielder Kyle Tucker. What's the latest with his market, and do you think he gets more than $400 million?
It was very quiet. And Kyle Tucker to where means. Didn't work out well for the Cubs. I mean, they made the playoffs and stuff. He had a poor second half for the second year in a row. I think the Blue Jays make all the sense in the world for him. Where else does he go? I don't know. I mean, the Dodgers would offer a 3 or 4 year deal. He wants a long-term contract, make it the last one. But very little talk on Tucker. The Yankees would use him as a backup if they can't get Bellinger. The Mets like Bellinger a lot, but they don't really like Tucker. If someone's going to fall through the cracks, it could be Tucker. Would it shock me if he signs a lower deal with some opt-outs? But very quiet on him. I don't think he gets over $400 million. I really don't.
And then we have outfielder Cody Bellinger, probably the second best position player in free agency. Where does he end up now that some of the dominoes had fallen, such as Schwarber to the Phillies, Alonso to the Orioles? There are still a lot of teams that need a player like Cody Bellinger.
Yeah, I would think Yankees or Mets make the most sense. I mean, Yankees obviously want him back. Now, with the Mets, they like him more than Tucker because in the sense where, hey, he can play, Gold Glove caliber defense in the outfield. Same thing at first base, more athletic, more speed, everything else. I don't see a great fit anywhere except for those two teams. I don't think he's going back to the Cubs, not going back to the Dodgers. I'm not sure where else he would fall. I think I'd be stunned if he's not with the Yankees or Mets.
Some of the big name starters are still out there. Left-hander Framber Valdez, right-hander Tatsuya Imai, left-hander Ranger Suarez, right-hander Zach Gallen, right-hander Michael King. Where do you expect some of those players to sign? And how did Dylan Cease signing with the Blue Jays for 7 years, $210 million on the day before Thanksgiving impact the starting pitching market?
Well, I think big time. I thought there's going to be Imai or Valdez that was going to set the high price. But 210 is a lot of money. So now everybody knows what it's going to take. So Framber Valdez is saying, wait a minute now, I'm not going to sign for less than that, or at least much less. Same thing with Imai. He's going to piggyback off Yamamoto, saying he got 325. Look how that turned out. So those are two big guys. Suarez is interesting. He's not going back to Philadelphia. So, he's going to probably get the third most money there. So I guess, when you think about the teams or the big boys, so we're talking about the Tigers, I think that makes sense for them to get one of those three guys. You don't know what you're going to get quite from Michael King with the injuries and stuff like that. He's going to be a cheaper contract than a guy like Zach Gallen will fall below that. That's why I think that everybody's looking at the trade market first. And I think that's what the Brewers they were going to. I think now they got no choice but to trade for Freddie Peralta. He's only making $8 million. I think everybody in the world is talking to the Brewers, and someone's going to give up a big package for the Brewers to go ahead and move him. I think he could be gone.
We talked plenty about Alex Bregman. We touched on Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger. We've already watched Kyle Schwarber and Pete Alonso sign. But what about shortstop Bo Bichette? How do you foresee his market unfolding? And is it as simple as returning to the Blue Jays if and or when his market crashes?
It's hard to see with the Blue Jays, signing Cease for $210 that they're going to be able to afford Tucker, and Bichette. I think they get one of them, but I don't think they get both of them. If Tucker goes to Toronto, I'm not sure where Bichette ends up. Bible guy, he showed he can play second base after struggling a little bit at shortstop. I can see him a number of places, but he's a guy that I'm not sure if he's going to get what he thought he can get. If you're the Blue Jays, you say, you know what? He was out all September. He missed the entire playoffs until the World Series. We got to the World Series without him. So I don't think they feel like they compelled to get him back. Who knows how much he wanted to come back either. A year ago, everybody kept talking about how he wanted to leave to Toronto. You're not hearing that now, which, even if he does, it's smart not to say it. So it'd be a nice fallback for a number of teams. And then I think it'd be a nice market, not the market he wants, but at least a lot of teams interested.
We mentioned the Ketel Marte situation. We've talked about Tarik Skubal. Aside from those two, are there any other players you're watching on the trade market this offseason?
Yeah, there's still a lot of those guys out there. I'm trying to think of the first baseman, the rookie for the Giants. I think he's available for pitching, their top prospect, because they don't have to have him. Like I said, I think Peralta's the number one pitcher out there. I think Sean Murphy for the Atlanta, the catcher, I think he's certainly available. Mountcastle and Imai now are available for the Orioles. And who knows, maybe they could trade Adley Rutschman. They say they won't, but they're certainly listening. So I think we'll still see a lot more movement on the trade front. And I think that's why agents are going crazy, because the talk at the winter meetings is all about trades, not so much about free agency. So I don't think free agency will really start picking up in earnest until everybody exhausts the trade market.
Before we get you out of here, I want to circle back to the Tigers and the American League Central. What are your expectations for that division in the 2026 season? The Tigers look like the best team on paper, especially with Tarik Skubal, but we both know you can never count out the Guardians and the Royals, and maybe even the Twins if they keep Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez, and Byron Buxton.
Yeah, Cleveland's always a team to watch. They always seem to overachieve. Again, remind you of Milwaukee in the National League and Tampa Bay in the AL East. So they're right there. Kansas City, they were very disappointed with what happened. I think they're kind of embarrassing to make the playoffs. So they're making moves against the outfielders. They're still out there trying to get somebody. I don't know if they'd be in the outfield in the market for like a Cody Bellinger. I think that's too rich for their blood, but they're going to get some help. So I think Kansas City makes an improvement to make it more of a three-team race. But I'm with you. I still think the AL Central goes to Detroit. Not as good as they were the first half last year, but they're certainly not as bad as they were the second half. So if they get some pitching, whether it's another starter, not a reliever, then I think they're the clear-cut favorites.
All right, Bob, I think that's all I have for you. You brought a ton of great information on all the big-name free agent and trade candidates. Thank you for joining me on this special episode, and let's do it again next offseason, as long as the winter meetings aren't canceled because of a work stoppage. Remember, the CBA expires at 11:59 p.m. on December 1st, 2026, and there is a chance of another lockout. But if there's no lockout, let's do this again next offseason. It's always a treat to have you on the show.
A pleasure. If there's a lockout, we'll see each other December of 2027.
Sounds good. Again, that was Bob Nightengale, USA Today Sports MLB columnist and insider. Stay tuned for our regular episode of Days of Roar that comes out Monday afternoon. Chris Brown and I will unpack more about the Tigers at the winter meetings and probably talk more about Tarik Skubal and Alex Bregman. Until then, go in peace.